The mules are in the corral. Welcome to Mule Talk, and I'm Cindy K. Roberts, your host.
On today's episode, we will be talking with world-renowned mule trainer, author, and TV personality Meredith Hodges of the Lucky 3 Ranch. This is episode 2 of Correct Saddle Fit and Placement. So Meredith, let's talk about girths. And what do you recommend to use on your mule?
As far as girths go, I like to use cotton or mohair string girths because those girths stretch slightly. They also, stretch with the animal's movement in between the strings, which allows for airflow and easy breathing for the animal. They do not become an aggravation. You got to be careful of nylon string girths. String girths are fine, and you might think, oh, yeah, well, these will spread and whatever, too. But they don't have the stretch that the cotton and the mohair does, and they can cause chafing. I like leather girths for the back girth.
Sure.
When leather is properly cured and kept conditioned, it pretty much holds its shape, but it will stretch a bit with the warmth from the animal's body once they get warmed up. That's why you tighten your girths a little at a time before you do the final check. And then after riding for about 10-15 minutes, you check it for the final time, because that is when the leather has stretched to its optimum stretch from the warmth of the animal. And this is also true of the leather that the saddle itself is made from. And it should be, when it gets warmed up, it will start to meld into the animal's torso a lot better, too. And so it's going to fit better. Animals or saddles that are not made from leather don't mold and stretch to the animal's body very well. And not only that, they will wear out a whole lot quicker than leather that is well managed. I've always taken care of my saddles, and they're from 1972 to 1994, and they all look brand new even today after 50 years of use. I also clean them right after use. When I come in, I don't go throw them into the tack room. I go ahead and clean them up. The other thing that I've found is with the cotton and the mohair girths, you could throw those in the washer, and then as you can with your saddle pads. I use Navajo blankets and fleece pads with my animals because those are conducive to also melding to the animal's torso.
Right.
The saddle, once you put your weight in there, the saddle starts to just float down against the torso, and it just melds right into it. I really dislike those thicker pads, and I don't care if they've got an open gap at the top of the spine. All you have to do when you use the Navajo blankets, with or without the fleece pad works if there's a little bit more wither, than normal. Or when they get older, when they get like that. But all you have to do when you put your saddle on before you tighten the girth, just go to the other side, adjust your girth so that it's going to land in the middle with the rings equal on each side, and then put your arm onto the gullet and lift the blanket and or the fleece pad and run your arm all the way down underneath the saddle before you tighten the girth. It will maintain that gap and allow airflow through there, and it won't rub on your animal. When you place the saddle, you need to put it in the middle of the animal's torso. That's, it's fine to go ahead and use my indication that the girth should lay 4 inches behind the forearm. But that may not be back far enough either on some animals. All animals are shaped as differently as we are people. So the best way to do it, and the best way to find out how to avoid any rubbing or chafing on the front or back of your saddle, is simply to look at the torso and put that center of gravity where you're going to sit right over the middle. And your stirrups should hang right down the middle of the torso and perpendicular to the ground. Then you reach under and grab your girth, your front girth, and you will find it's in the right position where the torso starts to swell, where the skin is thicker than it is right behind the forearm. And when you're doing your back girth, you will notice where that falls too, and you just bring that right underneath and keep that perpendicular to the ground and snug that up. Now the front girth and the back girth are going to be checked at that 15-minute of riding interval, at which point the back girth is going to be hanging about 2 inches below where it was, because these guys like to swell up when they know you're going to tighten that girth. Yeah. So you do it a little bit at a time, and then they don't get so anxious about it, and they don't swell up as much. So if you just do it a little bit at a time, it'll end up in the right place. So you want to do that to get your saddle right in the middle. And like I said, you use the pads that will allow the saddle to meld into your animal's body. And then I like using croupers because they allow for full range of motion of the hindquarters, which is really important going up and down hills.
Oh, yeah.
If they can't fully extend those hip joints because they're restricted by a butt strap on a breeching, that can get pretty dangerous, especially if it's a really steep hill, because they need to be able to extend that hind foot as far as it can go to stabilize the step that they're going to take with it going up that hill. If it's restricted, their balance will be off, and they will be in a position where they might go over backwards. And so, croupers are preferred, and those need to be adjusted snugly, and again need to be checked after the 15 minutes of riding, because if it's a proper crouper and made from nice soft bridle leather with the buckles up by the cantle, it will not flip the tail, and it won't put the tail, too much pressure on the tail. They don't break if they're made right. And so, I've ridden with a crouper all the time, up in the mountains, cross country, up and down hills with jumps at the bottom and up at the top and all that kind of stuff. And it puts, when the saddle fits like a glove, it flexes with the animal. It doesn't put pressure anywhere that it shouldn't. And so this is why you want that saddle adjusted properly. And then, of course, you will be sitting in the right position, and it's the physics of it all is that most of the pressure is going to be on your seat bones, and your legs are going to be relaxed, your upper body's going to be relaxed, you're going to be thinking tall up top, thinking deep in your legs with the weight down, and rather than thinking about putting your heels down, I find that it helps if you think more along the lines of keeping your toes up. Go ahead and let the weight fall into your heels, but then pull your toes up. And when you do that, it keeps your leg relaxed as it's going down. And when you're on your seat bones, when you're at a full stop, you're sitting upright. But when you're in motion, your legs need to be able to move with the rhythm of the animal. And so your legs can move right, left, forward as the animal's moving forward. They can move right, left, backwards as your animal is backing. And when you're backing, you lean a little bit forward. When you're going forward, you lean a little bit back. And when you get up on a cliff or anything, or a really steep hill, like the man from Snowy River did, you rock yourself back on those seat bones and let your relaxed legs fall forward, pulling your toes up, but you're not jamming your feet into the stirrups to hold your balance. And so you're not going to influence the balance of the animal in any way but positive by keeping your seat bones over the center of gravity and moving with the animal's motion. And that's what bronc riders and bull riders balance like. They aren't balancing with their legs. They're not gripping with their legs.
Right.
They're not jamming their feet down into the stirrups or even into their heels if they're bareback riding. They're riding their seat bones. And it's the fulcrum point in physics of motion. That's you can find that stuff in textbooks. And it works. And if you want to see if it works, one of the things I like to do, too, when I show people, is I will hold one of my hands, perpendicular, and then take my other hand and split my index finger from the middle finger and put it over the top like it's riding an animal on my other hand. And then I'll try to just think down with the hand that's got the two legs, quote unquote, and then move the hand that's sitting perpendicular to the ground with the palm facing you, and move it up and down and all around, and see if you can knock those two legs off of that stable body of fingers. You can't do it.
Right.
But if you squeeze the fingers, you can. If those fingers get off balance, you can. It's kind of a stupid example, but it works.
Right. Knowing all of this, Meredith, what is your take on corrective saddle pads where you can place shims in there to make a correction?
I think it's better to make a physical correction overall under the saddle by feeding and exercising your animal to develop his core strength and everything.
Sure.
I have found that because we're limited to, certain types of saddles and everything, a minimal shim is okay. I bought a Kiefer dressage saddle because I found that a lot of other dressage saddles were made for horses, and when I put them on my mules, they kind of pinched at the withers. The Kiefer with a medium tree seemed to fit okay, but and they had enough padding, in the back for the crupper to sit right. If the padding's not adequate on an English saddle, and you put those metal tees in there to hold that crupper, it can grind into the spinal column because it sits too low. Kiefers have a lot of padding back there, but I found that when I put my Kiefer on a mule, what happened was on my draft mule, he had really good withers. So it sat completely level, and it was fine. But on my saddle mules, it sat kind of so it was going down towards the shoulders. So what I did was I used a wedge pad on the saddle mules that brought the front end, the gullet, up on the Kiefer, and then it worked fine. And those kind of wedge pads, they're very small, and they do not interfere with the other pads you have underneath there. It just, raises it up in the gullet. And I think those kind of pads are fine. But if you try to, make a saddle that doesn't fit right with, all kinds of other kinds of pads that they have, and they've got foam in them, they've got all kinds of other stuff in them. All you do is upset the balance of a saddle that's not balanced anyway.
Yeah.
So, you just have to be sensible about that. And the other thing, people were asking me, oh, you've got this big draft mule. How are you going to find a saddle to fit? Well, again, all my saddles fit fine because of what I did in the gullet of the tree.
Yeah.
I shaved them flat. So where that muscle is on the mule, it wasn't hitting them. And the withers being higher on the draft mule, I didn't need the wedge pad when I put my dressage saddle on him. So I just rode in that. I thought perhaps because he had high withers that riding him in some of my Western saddles might not be an option. Besides, it was easier for me to just get a girth extender for the girth, put that saddle on his back, my dressage saddle on his back, and do a dressage, girth extender on it, and then it fit him just fine.
Wow.
I could have gotten a longer girth on the Western saddles that I have with a little higher gullet on them. They probably would have fit too. But I was doing dressage, so I wanted the dressage saddle. It's an option. But those are the only things that I would do, with any saddle. So I'm sure that a lot of people have saddles that were built pretty balanced and pretty well. And so maybe all they do need to do is adjust the length of the girth and find a saddle maker and have them flatten that tree on the gullet. And it probably, it's probably going to be a lot less cost, than buying a whole new saddle.
Oh,
and
sure.
then when you're at, when your saddle fits correctly, then you can ride correctly. Then you're not fighting with a saddle that's moving incorrectly, because that can be very frustrating, and it can block you from, really learning to ride correctly. You got to realize, too, when you're setting the saddle, I see so many saddles that are set too far forward.
Right.
And people, they're trying to do the right thing, but those shoulder blades are so close to the gullets of the saddle, and the saddles are not sitting mid-torso. And, that's just not going to work. They're going to get rubbed. You're going to ride off balance. The saddle's going to be off balance, and it's going to cause the animal aggravation. And when they get aggravated, they buck.
Right.
When their spine is out of alignment because the saddle is shifting from side to side and pinching their spine and getting it out of alignment, they're going to do whatever they can to shift that thing right. But if the saddle is fitting like a glove and not moving, then you don't have to move either, and your riding is going to get better a lot quicker. And you will not be obstructing their movement. You'll start to learn to move with them, and then they have no reason to bolt, run, buck, or do any of these things, and they will actually enjoy their time with you. They are slightly anatomically different than horses. Mules are.
Mm-hmm.
They are narrower in front because of the lack of bulk muscle. They've got a lot more smooth muscle than horses do. And so a lot of people think they can capture the body by putting breast collars in the front and breeching behind. But, if they attach the breeching with all those snaps or all those straps, and they're tight enough to hold the saddle in the middle, then they're too tight for them to really move. They're kind of strapped in and harnessed in that stuff, and they can't move, and it's going to irritate them.
Right.
And not only that, with all those straps, man, one of them's going to chafe them and start making bald spots on them. And putting fleece on them doesn't help either, because when you've got something that's moving, it doesn't matter what you use. If it doesn't fit right, it's going to rub back and forth, and it's going to take the hair off. It just does. It doesn't matter what kind of material it's made out of.
Okay.
So putting a fleece over the top of it is not going to help. It needs to fit. Now with these breast collars, they rub, and they rub on a mule, because the mule is narrower in front than a horse is and doesn't have all that fatty bulk muscle to put that saddle in position and hold it there. The indication with a saddle on a horse is that if he's going up and down hills, the saddle will most likely stay where it is going down the hill, but going up the hill, it will tend to slide backwards, and that's why they use breast collars on Western saddles.
Yes.
They even use breast collars on cross-country horses as well, because the saddle slides backwards. The saddle slides forward on a mule because there's barely any wither there to hold it. The mule is narrower in front, and he is wider behind on his torso
Mm-hmm.
until you get to the flanks, where most people want to tighten up those back girths and put them clear back there to hold the saddle, keep it from going forward. This is kind of a non-common sensical thing to do. If you know anatomy on any equine, you know that the undercarriage rib bones are very, very narrow right in front of the flanks. And they are allowed to contract and expand because they're smaller and narrower like that, because they're housing the small intestine, and in the females, they're housing the genitals as well.
Okay.
And those organs need to be able to breathe. When you put a strap there, it inhibits the ability for the organs to expand and contract internally, and it also puts those fragile bones at risk for fracture. And if one of those things get fractured, your animal's going to be so uncomfortable, he's going to buck you off.
You bet. Wow.
They use those straps on bucking horses because that's exactly what's going to happen. And if you're, there are those that say, oh, well, my mule won't buck when I put that back there. That means your mule is just more tolerant than most.
Right, exactly.
It doesn't mean you're not hurting him.
Right.
The other thing is when you put your saddle right behind the shoulder blades, you got to realize that the shoulder blades are not a joint. They are floating over the rib cage, the front of the rib cage, and they are held there with cartilage. So it doesn't take much pressure from a saddle to really make those things bruised and sore. So that's why you want to make damn sure that saddle is sitting mid-torso and secured there so it does not run into those shoulder blades at all and push the point of the shoulder forward, the shoulder blade forward, and stretch all that cartilage that's holding it on that rib cage. That can really make your animal sore.
Wow.
So
yeah,
we don't think about these things.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about an animal that's in harness, you need to think about the same thing.
Sure.
That collar, if you're using a collar harness, needs to be set in front of those shoulders and not right in front of it so it's riding on them, but, an inch or two ahead of the shoulder blades and on the same angle. And mules and donkeys are steeper in the shoulders than horses are. So you can't just say, oh, you said it like this. Put 2 inches on, and you do put 2 extra inches on the measurement of the collar, but you also want to make sure that 2 inches is sufficient so that when you put that collar on, it's sitting on the same angle in front of the shoulder blades, so it's not pushing on them. And you got to realize that when you attach the traces to the single tree in the back, that your animal is put well back, because you need to be able to adjust the breeching so that it's laying across the rear end of your animal so that he is enclosed in that rigging, but he's not restricted in the rigging. And when your breeching is too loose, he is. The way that you can tell if you've got it right is if it's all sitting snugly on him. He's well back, so when you ask him to back, the breeching is immediately engaged and the vehicle moves. The tugs that are on the surcingle are meant to hold the weight of the shafts so that there is an additional help in pushing that cart back so that it's not all relied on the breeching. If it was, it would rub. But since it's kind of dispersed over the surcingle too, it won't take the full weight of the shafts pushing the vehicle backwards. It has help. And the way they make marathon vehicles anymore They used to make them with the shafts going all the way to the front to the shoulders, right there at the base of the collar. Now they're not even saying to do that, and on the new carts and carriages, they're decreasing the length of the shafts so that now you should adjust it with the shafts equal to right there at the top of the forearm.
Okay.
So that when the animal turns, he's not going to be turning into the shafts, because during any wrecks or runaways, those shafts can break, shift, and splinter and cause the animals all kinds of damage.
Wow.
The ones on the marathon carts are made out of metal, and now they make them so they loop around the tugs and don't even go forward. They're just right there. So the backing is actually done, with the tugs and the breeching, and the pulling. The traces help, but most of the weight of the pulling is on the tugs. So that's something you just don't think about, but people have discovered this, while they're doing these competitions. This stuff is common sense rising to the top here, which I think is very, very cool. The importance of it takes a little time to develop your animal's core strength and his shape and all of that, but it's not hard work. It's actually work that you should do anyway.
Right.
My hourglass pattern, people might think it's really boring, but they also complain about when they're leading their animals that if they stop, their animals pull against them, and some of them that are trying to do the hourglass pattern with the fanny pack full of oats around their waist say that they're diving into them and pushing them around and all of that. Well, if you had your right arm and, if you're tracking left and have your arm out in front of their face, you can stop that real easy.
Sure.
So there are things that you learn in that hourglass pattern that will facilitate the good behavior and the good movement of your animal. And it behooves you, no pun intended, to spend a lot more time doing this. And it takes between 3 and 6 months to develop core strength leading in the hourglass pattern before you even add obstacles for coordination. Be willing to put that time in and learn the little victories that you can appreciate along the way. And it will become fun to see the changes in your equine as they occur, because now you're not moving so fast to get to riding that you will actually recognize these victories as they occur. I mean, where your animal was pushing you around before, he'll square up because he's done this 100 times. And you come to a stop and he will square up. You use these same techniques not only when you're in the hourglass pattern. You lead your animal with the line in the lead line in your left hand, pointing in the direction of travel with your right hand. You'll talk to him. You'll tell him to walk on. You will see what foot moves first. You will put your feet in sync with his feet. And when you stop, you will stop with your feet together. And you will develop a very clear language between you. And he will learn to do this. And pretty soon you'll be able to throw the lead rope over his neck, and he will learn by your consistent body language. He will learn how to communicate with you without you even pulling on him at all. Just verbal communication, body language, and you be moving together. So when you go to get him from the stall, you should never have to chase him. You call him by his name to come to the gate or come to the stall door. And lots of people go, mine do that already. Well, yeah, they do, and they come there for the food.
That's right.
And then as soon as you try to put the halter on them and they don't want to go, they leave.
Right.
But if the whole exercise is pleasant for them, through the whole thing, they will come to know that you are responsible for the comfort that they experience in their bodies, and they will want to go with you every time, oats or not. They will come to you, they'll let you put the halter on, and then you reinforce it going from their stall to the work area. Anytime you've got a halter on that animal, you walk the same way. You are consistent with the way you handle them every single time. And when you do that, then they come to know that whatever you do is going to be comfortable for them. And you can work on being comfortable together with every single thing you do. All tack and equipment. I ride in an English bridle with a drop noseband because most of my animals, they like playing with their tongues. Mules are busy little animals.
They are.
When you put a bridle on them for the first time, they go, oh, what's in this mouth? What's in my mouth? Oh, this feels good. Okay. And they try and they taste it every way they can. And I just come up with this English bridle with a flash noseband. It isn't cruel to say this is not a toy.
Right.
This is something that needs to fit your head properly. I usually find that I have to get buy warm blood brow bands separately because a lot of these cob-sized heads on these mules still are wide across the forehead. So when you're putting your bridle on there, those standard horse bridles, those brow bands are always too tight.
That's right.
So I make sure that I have a brow band that fits them and a flash noseband, one that goes behind the bit and in front of the bit, so that I can clamp their jaws down on that bit, and you don't have to get it tight, but it needs to be snug enough so that they can't open their mouth and stretch that leather and then get that tongue back out again, And sometimes it has to be a little tight to start with, but you can see how they're doing with it, and then each time you use it, you can loosen it up a little bit. But it's still better than using a twisted wire snaffle bit with no noseband, because you're not teaching them anything.
Right.
You're just hurting them.
Yeah.
And then they get bloody at the corners of the mouth, and then they don't like it, and they don't want to go with you, and they don't want to do what you ask them to do, so they fight with you. And then, getting a bit with a French snaffle bit, for instance, something that may be for a green animal, but it's got something to play with in the middle. If you got somebody that's playing with something already, you don't want to exacerbate that and encourage it. You want to discourage it. And when you use these nosebands on the mules like this and tell them, no, we're all business here. We're gonna learn how to communicate. And when I finally get on you, I'm gonna need to communicate with my fingers, my little fingers going to the corners of your mouth, and you need to be holding that bit in your mouth. And the best way to do that is to put your tongue underneath it and push it up against your palate. And then when I put pressure on it, it will only slide back and forth on your tongue a very little bit. It does not have the crackerjack motion that most people envision in their mind.
Yeah,
it does not do that. And if you want a mule that's like ultralight in the bridle, then this is what you want to do. And people tell me, oh, I don't like the elbow pull. It's like draw reins. No, it's not. The elbow pull simply discourages the animal from rising their head too high where they hollow their back and their neck. Other than that, they have full range of motion. They can put it up higher than the withers and arch their back. They can put it all the way to the ground. They can put it all the way to each side and everything. It just gives them something to lean on when they're too weak to be able to hold good posture. It's not a restraint, it's an aid. With all of this, doing groundwork is really the most important thing to sustain good posture. It does take a long time to establish it, but if you think of it in terms of giving your animal longevity in his use life, you're adding about 10 years. So to spend 2 doing proper groundwork is really a good trade-off.
Oh, you bet.
Doing the groundwork teaches your body to move with the motion of the animal. First during leading with your front legs, then doing ground driving, and you match the back legs. Your brain becomes in sync with his brain in motion, so that when you get on, you're already halfway there.
Meredith, this has been amazing. Thank you for coming on to Mule Talk and giving us your valuable time. Your expertise is so appreciated. And you do have a website.
Yes, I do. My website is at www.lucky3ranch.com. And if you look under training, there's a lot of free information under there about all the stuff we're talking about. And if you have any more questions about details, you're welcome to email me at Meredith, Meredith, at lucky3ranch.com. I have a Facebook page at Meredith Hodges, public figure, where a lot of these things are posted as well. Or if you just want to talk, I do answer the phone. Please leave a message if you don't get me straight up, because I do answer everyone that communicates with me. My phone number is 800-816-7566.
Awesome. And you also have a children's website. Tell me about that.
Yes, we do have a children's website, and we've got all kinds of information and games for kids, as well as music videos and coloring pages at jasperthemule.com.
Thank you, Meredith. We will talk soon.
If you'd like to be a guest on the show or a sponsor, send me an email.
everycowgirlsdream@gmail.com.
Gotta go. My mule is looking for me.
Mule Talk is an Every Cowgirl's Dream production.